and they brought the king word again. Will you hear what he understood? He understood that God's wrath was on the church. He understood that God was intent in making a desolation out of Judah and Jerusalem. But he also understood that because God had moved his heart to cry out in repentance for his people and for himself, God said, I will not do it in your days. Do you guys see that? Yeah. Will you hear me? There are two things, two sacrifices that God accepts. Two sacrifices. He accepts the sacrifice of his darling son on Calvary's tree as a substitute for guilty sinners. That's the sacrifice. Here's the other one. A broken and a contrite heart I will not despise. What I said in our outline last week in our pastor's commentary was our nation is in trouble, if you read the commentary. It's in trouble because every time that God sends a trumpet in our land, rather than falling on our face and repenting of the evil that we continue to do as a nation, we say we'll build bigger barns. We'll regroup. We'll reboot. We'll restructure. We'll reestablish ourselves and overcome these difficulties. We don't say, Lord, have mercy on us. See, and the children of Israel are in what we would call an impenetrable state, an impenitent state, because their hearts are given over to this idolatry. Read it for yourself. The preacher who is corresponding with Josiah's time is Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the weeping prophet, the lamenting prophet, the prophet of destruction, going through Israel and Judah and Jerusalem and warning that God's wrath is coming. His wrath is coming. But they're laughing at him. He's weeping and crying and saying, turn, but they won't. You know what they say? Jeremiah chapter 3. He says, look, in Jeremiah chapter 3, God says, you say in your heart, there is no hope. We have given ourselves over to idols, and to idols we shall go. Saints, do you understand what force there must be in idols? What power there must be in the demons behind those idols to cause you to give up on the true and the living God? I'm here to tell you that's the attitude and disposition of this present generation in which you and I live. We're going after our lovers. We're going to get what we can get, and we're going to get all we can get in this present generation. So God says, I'm giving them over to destruction. Now, entertain me for a few more minutes because I want to show you a few things about Josiah's reform. What he does is remarkable. What he does is remarkable. He takes the whole issue on himself. Chapter 23, verses 1 through 3 tell us that Josiah made a covenant with God. He made a covenant with God. He went before God and he says, God, you give me grace, I'll keep your commandments. He made a covenant before God. And then he took that covenant oath that he made and went before all the people. And he told the people, I'm keeping God's covenant. And you know what else he said? You're keeping God's covenant too. That's exactly what he said. And the people stood to the covenant that Josiah made with God. Isn't that what the text said? Didn't you guys read that when our elder was reading, or were you guys reading the newspaper? Look at verse 3. And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul. Listen to it. To perform all the words of this covenant that were written in this book. Now watch this. And all the people stood to the covenant. Can I share something with you? One man can do a lot of good. One man can do a lot of good. Share something else with you. This is how important leadership is. This is how important godly leadership is. Because as a norm, the people, I told you this before, we're like water. You know, we reach the lowest common denominator. We're like electricity, you know, the least path of resistance. We don't naturally strive to the highest excellencies. If our leaders are corrupt, we're corrupt. I talked to you about Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac last week, didn't I? I would have said Freddie Mac, but you know, why would you borrow something from a guy named Freddie Mac? Why would you? Why would you borrow something? You know Freddie Mac's going to rip you off, don't you? Oh, but as long as it's the government, it's okay. Haven't you found out that even with the government, they're ripping people off? Can I say something? Please hear this. The way the government is in its dealings with money is the way we are in our dealings with money. You can try to blame the government, but you can't blame them completely because you're conspiracy to the crime too. This credit debt system that we all exist in is immoral and it's bringing us down. See, I know we don't like that, but it's absolutely true. This is what the Old Testament says. The borrower is slave to the lender. And our whole nation is under this credit debt system. And we have been living a lie, buying houses and cars and businesses and putting up a front when we can't even afford it. Do you hear what I'm saying? And many of the prognosticators saw the fall decades ago. We've been talking about this for the longest. This here is nothing but a stacked card house, this system that we've been under. And now that it's caving in, we're all getting mad at the government. But the government is merely a mirror of the people. You and I are guilty. I'm praying that God would teach our young people. I'm praying that God would teach our young people how to be responsible with money and don't fall into the same trap of this generation. I'm praying that God would teach them the errors of our ways, that he would show them sound economic principles and economic principles that are consistent with God's biblical priorities so that they can be blessed in spite of the delusion that has dominated 300 million people. 300 million people. When our leaders are corrupt, we're corrupt. When our leaders are godly, there's a good likelihood that a handful of people will follow godly leaders. And even the ones that are ungodly are susceptible and influenced by godly legislation and godly principles. Even the ungodly. Judah, Jerusalem, Ephraim, Bethel. Josiah went through and cleaned house, folks. And even the ones that didn't like it said, man, look at Josiah. Did you guys read the account? This man was moved to purge Israel of idolatry. And he did. And he did. So I'll show you two or three things in this reform and close us out. Next week we'll deal with the Passover. Look at it in point number 3, the purpose, the power, and the pattern of one man. The purpose is that he would keep the covenant. You guys got that? The power was demonstrated in how King Josiah went through all these lands and completely exterminated idolatry. What was the first thing that he got rid of? First thing he got rid of was the syncretism that was corrupting the temple. Look at verse 4. The king commanded Hilkiah the priest and the priest of the second order and